Welcome back to another postcard from the Edge. I promised I would talk about removal costs to Scotland, and I suppose our removal costs to Scotland are exacerbated by the fact that we're moving to an island. And so if you're planning on island life, this is something you perhaps maybe want to factor in if you're considering it. It may just make you stop and think twice. If the island you're thinking of moving to involves a ferry trip, if you're going to Skye, that's okay, there's a road bridge. But like us, we're moving to the Outer Hebrides, and so the only way to get your goods there really is by ferry. And that has introduced a whole new level of complication to the move, and we knew it would be more expensive than average, obviously, not least because of the distance, but because of the ferry. But currently, up in the Hebrides, there are issues with the Calmac ferries going over to the Outer Hebrides. The Ullapool to Stornoway run is fine. The ferry, is good fettle and it's working well. So if you're thinking of moving to Harrison Lewis, probably not an issue quite so much, apart from the distance and the cost that brings with it. But if you're going to some of the other islands, please be aware that currently, as of 2025, most of the ferries going to those islands are smaller, considerably smaller, and therefore have a reduced capacity for the big wagons that are required for house moves. So often sort of 17, 18 ton wagons. Also, they have an allocation on them for lifeline services. So what that means is that obviously the islands are utterly dependent on lifeline services for food for the shops, medical supplies and things like that, fuel for the petrol and diesel pumps, and for fuel oil for people who, most people have oil-fired central heating and so on, and other things like this. And these are graded by the Scottish Government as lifeline supplies, and the majority of space for goods vehicles on the smaller ferries, on all ferries, are allocated to vehicles providing those services, and the companies that provide those services allocate and book those slots many months in advance to make sure that they've got them. So when it comes to your removal company wanting to book those slots, especially in the busier months, the tourist months, it is extremely difficult and extremely expensive, and there is huge competition for them. And this almost certainly will cause you issues. And of course, we're moving in August, in all likelihood, which is the busiest month of the year for removal companies all over the country. So it is the most expensive month of the year to move. Everybody apparently, puts their house on the market after Christmas, in the spring and so on. And so the knock-on effect of that is that most people are moving in August, and actually most people want to move in August because, the weather's good, and also because of the school holidays. Parents want to get the move done while the children are out of school. So that also adds to how busy things are. And also people are often able to get time off work apparently at this time, if they work for a firm that has shutdown weeks and things like that. There's all sorts of reasons. Anyway, August is the most expensive month, and of course it's the busiest month tourist-wise for going over to the islands. So there are lots of people booking camper vans and caravans, and going over in their cars and staying in bed and breakfast accommodation and cottages and so on. It's chaos. So it is nigh on impossible for the removal companies to get a slot. And of course, you don't know your completion date until fairly close to when it happens. And it is not close enough, really, to have much chance of booking any of the hen's teeth slots that are available on the ferries. It's very, very difficult. There are some companies who specialise in moving to the Hebrides. Hebrides Haulage, based in Stornoway, Scottish Removals based on Skye, and so on. So you can research them, and they are less phased by these issues. They're dealing with them all year, every year, and always have done and always will do, and they're brilliant. Some of the English companies, once they start to research it, they get all excited about doing a move to the islands when they first talk to you, and they think, oh, this is exciting, this will be a bit of a holiday for the lads, and so on. And then you start getting phone calls from them, horrified, and starting to sort of warn you about the issues they're facing and about the costs that are coming up and the slack they're having to build in. They're also starting to realise that the roads going up into Scotland are very, very busy at that time of the year. These tiny little Scottish roads, and they're going to be driving in a huge wagon, and the speed that the lorry is going to be driving in. To give you an idea, that most of the companies to move us from near Sheffield in the north of England to Uist up in the Hebrides are talking about allowing 8 days for our move. Okay, so that's to empty our home, to get up there, do the ferry crossing, unload, and to get the wagon back down to England. 8 days. So you can imagine some of the figures that we've been getting in the quotes. We're talking 10,000-12,000 pounds in 2025. That seems to be the kind of ballpark that we're looking at. So brace yourself. And a lot of the firms are saying we're just not going to be able to get a slot in August. So we're looking at the situation where we're going to have to leave our home in August, and we'll get access to our house on the Hebrides in August, but all we will be able to have with us is what we can get in our pickup truck. We're going to have to rough it, and the solution we're coming up with is we're going to use an English company to move us up into Scotland and put our stuff into storage in Scotland for a few weeks. And then the earliest ferry slot that we have now booked, because even in September things are getting booked up very quickly with all the backlog, is the middle of September. So we're going to be 3 to 4 weeks without the majority of our worldly possessions. And it's just the only solution we can find for the problem. And obviously then, in addition to the removal costs, we've got the storage costs of our property, and the additional cost of the guys unloading everything into storage, and then another firm, an island-based firm, then reloading a truck and taking it over to the island and unloading it into our house and then getting back over to the mainland. So just factor that in. If you're thinking, a removal firm's can be 2-3 grand or something like that, no. It is a serious additional cost to moving up there. And I think for some people it could be a factor which alters your perspective over living on the islands as living on the mainland. Or maybe the island that you live on, you may choose to live on an island like Skye, where you can get over on a road bridge. Or you might choose to live in a sort of an island-like community, a remote community. So you could live, for example, on the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, which is island-like life. It's quite remote, and you can get to it by ferry, actually. But you can also drive around the long way, sort of near the Glenfinnan Viaduct and so on, and then drop down into the peninsula by road, and probably the removal costs will be a little bit less as a result of that. So you might just want to factor that in when you're up in Scotland and you're looking at property, just thinking about these things and weighing it up. because that money is kind of spent just doing the move. So you're getting a service for it, but it's not adding any value to your property. You're not getting anything physical or tangible for it. It's a one-off service that's been provided for you for that, and that's it. Once it's spent, it's money that's just gone forever, and we're accepting it as a cost of achieving the island life that we so desire, and we're kind of sucking it up. But it's a bitter pill to swallow. It's a tough one to swallow. It's very difficult, and I know that I know somebody who's leaving an island, who's moving to Scotland, mainland Scotland, going over towards the east coast, and leaving the island and having to use a ferry and getting off onto the mainland, and that move is costing them nearly £7,000. So you've got to factor this in. It is not a cheap thing to do, to make that shift. So you've got to factor that in, and you have to remember then that once you're on the island and you're living island life, that if you suddenly order some white goods, you order a washing machine or something like that, you've got to often pay for delivery, whereas maybe on the mainland you might get free delivery. A lot of companies do free delivery now, but with island life, getting stuff is probably easier than it used to be, but things like the Outer Hebrides, this is where you'll see on the delivery page of a lot of companies, there's a little paragraph which says free delivery except these postcodes, asterisks. And if you check those postcodes out, it'll be places like the Outer Hebrides, Orkney, Shetland, and places like that. So just be aware that that there are some things that you have to accept if you're going to live in a really remote, beautiful place, and that's part of island life. And the other thing you have to accept as well with this is that those ferries that I was talking about, to the not the one to Harrison Lewis, but the other Outer Hebrides, they are old ferries. They're not just small, but they're old, and they are breaking down on a regular basis. And it could be that your removal firm gets up there and the ferry doesn't run, it's broken down, they can't get on it, and they may be stuck. And they'll have something in their contract about that. And it may be that they'll maybe wait 24 hours or 48 hours even, but then they'll say, no, we've got to go, we've got other work to do. We're going to have to put your stuff into storage. We're going to go back to Glasgow and put it into a warehouse for you. And you'll have to arrange to pick it up and move it another time. So just be prepared that things could escalate, or there could be a really bad storm and the ferry is cancelled. And they may be able to wait till the next day, but they might not, and you just have to be prepared for that. And it's the islanders just say it's island life. Get over it. Don't get stressed about it. Don't get worked up about it, because there's no point. If you want to live in these places, you have to accept it. Now, if you're moving to the mainland, it's likely not such a problem, and so that may influence your decision about island life as opposed to mainland life. And there are some stunning places on the mainland, and we looked at many of them. And again, it might just influence your decision. You may have this dream about living on an island, but just think about all of the factors that go with that, and whether you can cope with that, and whether it is something you can live with. You have to be 100% sure that you can put up with it, that you can accept it, that it's not going to drive you crazy when you've been used to having a big supermarket down the road, a big shopping centre, that you've been used to having Amazon next day, that you've been used to free deliveries, that you've been used to having takeaways, that you've been used to having Domino delivering for you within 20 minutes, at half time in the football match, and all these other things. Being able to get a guy to work on your car, having a hand car wash, a million and one things that we've gradually come to take for granted living in towns and cities in England that often do not exist in these places in Scotland. Think about it, and just think about how much you use these things and whether you can live without them. For a lot of us, we are more than happy to walk away from them. Actually, we want to get away from them and we want to get back to something more basic. But sometimes we think that's what we want, but after a couple of weeks or a couple of months or 6 months or a year, maybe we might start to regret it, especially when we're at the end of a 10-day storm where the rain has been horizontal and we can hardly stand up outside. Maybe we start to have second thoughts. You've got to be pretty sure that you can live with that. Elizabeth and I have been going to Scotland now every winter and staying up there on the west coast, literally on a beach, for a month to 2 months every winter, and we go for that weather and those conditions. We don't go to Scotland in the summer. If anything, I'm maybe a bit more nervous about being there when the tourists are there and when the weather's nicer. That is maybe what I'm a bit more nervous about. I like the solitude, I like the extreme weather, I like the winters and so on, and so I'm less concerned about those things. So anyway, there's a few thoughts about moving and removals. It's just another one of the joys of and the stresses of the moving process to Scotland. I hope you have a better experience than we're having, but I think we've got our ducks in a row now. We've chosen our company to get us up to Scotland. We've chosen our Scottish company to move us over to the island. We're very happy with both of them, and after the move, if I'm still happy with them, I'll tell you who they are, and be happy to give you a huge recommendation. I've no doubt that it'll be an excellent experience with them, because they both seem like absolutely fabulous companies and really lovely people. But we think that that's the best arrangement for us, and I have absolute confidence in both firms. And we've done a lot of research and spoken to a lot of companies. Had about 7 quotes now, and have really gone into it in a lot of detail. So we'll hopefully help you benefit from our experience. But thank you for watching. As people seem to say on these videos, please like and subscribe. That seems to be the done thing, and very much appreciate you watching. And I hope it's been helpful anyway, me just rabbiting on. Okay, speak to you next time. Bye-bye.